Welcome back to Inside Games, the only gaming news show brave enough to demand our consoles thick as fuck.
That's right. Bring them wide. We like them heavy and hot.
That's why we're bummed that Sony appears to be skimping on parts when it comes to the latest model revision of the PlayStation 5.
Early reports have led to a consensus that the new model is objectively worse and possibly more prone to overheating.
Oh, not to mention general confusion on why Sony decided to revise the PlayStation 5 already when the console is not even a year old.
I mean, some of the questions that pop out is that, like, is the new console actually just worse? Should you specifically, if you're looking for one, should you specifically try to find one model over the other?
There's not really a super easy answer, so let's just start at the beginning and we'll make it all the way through and we'll give you an answer at the end.
Long story time. It's not that long. PlayStation Universe first spotted the hardware revision back in July when Sony updated their Japanese PS5 safety guide with a new model number. That would be CFI-1100 to be specific. The original model, the one that shipped, is CFI 1000, so we'll refer to the new model as the 1100 series going forward.
At the time, the manual didn't have too many details about what this revision meant for the 1100 series. Aside from a new threaded screw on the stand, the only difference seemed to be reduced weight, going from 3.9 kilograms at launch to 3.6.
It's kind of neat. That's usually good. It remained a mystery where that weight was coming from until Austin Evans' teardown of the new model that he imported from Japan, and that was published on YouTube on August 28th. Once Austin removed the heat plate inside, the difference was pretty clear. The 1100 series PS5 had a much smaller heatsink, and it was made out of cheaper materials than the launch model.
The newer model has fewer heat pipes in the heatsink, from 6 down to 4, is missing an entire section of heat-dissipating metal fins, and generally contains less copper than the original heatsink.
Yeah, so quick aside there. Copper is a much better heat conductor than aluminum, but is also, you guessed it, more expensive. So when it comes to cooling, it's usually a question of cost versus efficiency in dissipating heat versus weight.
So the new PS5 is probably hotter than the launch model. Is that correct, Lawrence?
It is, but this is the really weird part. It's not really hot by much, which is weird. Austin Evans measured the 1100 series PS5 exhaust at 55 degrees Celsius. That's 131 degrees Fahrenheit in freedom measurement, while the launch model spit out 52 degrees Celsius, and that's 125.6 degrees Fahrenheit.
So it's a difference of about 5 degrees, which is really not that much different. 5 degrees Fahrenheit in the freedom measurements.
It's really not that much different, and that's kind of weird, given the trade-off.
What's even weirder is the new PS5 isn't louder either. This was something that people complained about with the PlayStation 5, was hot and loud, and it's actually not louder. So typically that's the trade-off. If you have a smaller heatsink, you got to blow more air over it to compensate, and thus more fan noise. In this case, though, the 1100 series is actually a little bit quieter than the base model.
It's only by a few decibels, and that's not anything that a normal person would really be able to tell the difference, but still, the math is there. It's kind of neat. And why is that? It's because Sony apparently put in a fundamentally better fan. The 1100 series has longer fan blades and more of them, meaning it can potentially move more air for the same fan speed.
So in the end, it seems the new model traded copper and weight for an improved fan, and despite a few degrees warmer exhaust, came out nearly even in the exchange. There appear to be a few other changes to Wi-Fi, potentially Bluetooth placements, but those factors haven't been completely tested yet.
What makes this even more bizarre? Usually when you get these kind of like, and I'm speaking from an engineering perspective, an everybody wins scenario, it's like it's cheaper, it's lighter, and it's not hotter or louder. Usually you get, you can only trade them. Usually this accompanies some kind of modernization in the manufacturing of the silicon itself.
Technology progresses, chips get smaller and cheaper, and at some point, it's cheaper to re-engineer your console with modern parts that use less power and put off less heat from the same performance. Happens all the time with consoles. That's why we see them get refreshed every single year almost.
But in this case, the 1100 series PS5 consumes about the same power and spits out about the same heat as the launch model, meaning that it's unlikely this is using re-engineered chips.
So it seems this really is just a heatsink fan exchange and that's it, which begs a couple of questions. First, why would Sony go to the effort of revising the whole model just to tinker with the heatsink? And second, since this is so close to launch, why didn't they just implement this in the launch model in the first place?
There is a possible explanation. Eurogamer's Richard Ledbetter offers some pretty reasonable speculation regarding that second question, why it wasn't like this at launch. As he explains, parts for consoles are prepped in parallel at launch, so you gotta make everything at the same time. Given that Sony had to design all these individual parts for mass production before assembly and shipping, and then putting millions of units into the world, it kind of makes sense to err on the side of caution for your initial assembly and production run.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Nobody wants another Red Ring incident I'm sure console makers remember that and will remember that for as long as they're making consoles.
It's possible Sony designed the heat sinks with an ample margin of error in their capacity to dissipate heat. And now that Sony has millions of units working properly out on the market, they found that they can safely bite into that margin a little in exchange for construction cost savings.
Ledbetter even points out that you could see a similar strategy in Microsoft's launch of the Xbox One. So in August 2013, Xbox pushed a patch to consoles that bumped the CPU and GPU clock speeds, indicating that Microsoft chose to ship the console with a larger thermal margin that they felt comfortable narrowing later on.
It's not exactly applicable, but similar. In Xbox One's case, they had a cooling situation that they kept in place and then just bumped the performance up to match. It seems like maybe in the PS5's case, they actually re-engineered the hardware to save production cost instead of bumping the spec to match.
Sony themselves inadvertently said that production costs of the PlayStation 5 have come down. In early August, Sony announced that the $500 PlayStation 5 no longer sold at a loss, though the $400 digital edition still does. That could be entirely due to the hardware redesign, or who knows, they could also have renegotiated with their suppliers, any number of other factors that influence the cost of the PlayStation 5.
That's also, incidentally, our best guess to that first question from a while ago, too. They revised the model to make the PS5 profitable to manufacture and sell. Pretty simple. And while shoving less copper into every PS5 is undoubtedly a big factor in that, it may not be the only one right now.
Yeah, going from 3.9 to 3.6 kilograms represents a 7.6% reduction in weight. And with COVID disrupting the global shipping industry, shaving 7% off your shipping weight may be far more meaningful than it was in years past because of the pandemic.
Yeah, so just for fun, and I promise this is fun, we used a shipping calculator at freightquote.com to see the difference in freight shipping costs if we were to send 10 PS5s from Los Angeles to New York.
Again, these numbers are completely useless, by the way. This is just all clown math. Sony is guaranteed to have their own arrangements directly with shipping companies moving freight over the ocean, which is what they do. It's completely different from shipping by truck in the United States.
Yeah, but still, it wouldn't be an episode of Inside Games without some clown math, so let's hear those numbers.
As you'd expect, the heavier PS5s are more expensive to move, with FedEx quoting $867 to move the 1100 series and $957 for the launch units, which are the ones that weigh more. A 7% reduction in weight led to a 9% reduction in shipping costs.
In a random quote from a random website, yes.
I mean, yes, that's a quote from a random website. I am happy to say that if Sony has their own actual contracts with shippers across the ocean and stuff like that, I would imagine their reduction is probably more than 9%. They probably save a little more than that.
That helps Sony out, but in the middle of clicking through a quote, I realized if I were a scalper, I'd be pretty happy about this too. Moving bulks of PS5s around the US, it's going to take less of their stupid goddamn scalp margin if it's a lighter product to ship, and that makes me mad.
It should. Yeah, it should. Point is, Sony is getting more savings out of this model redesign than just in the cost of materials, and the state of the shipping market probably pushed them towards a weight reduction.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know for sure. If shipping were still cheap and attainable, it may not have been worth the re-engineer in the first place. Obviously, only Sony knows that, but it's fun to think about. It's fun to pretend.
Now for the big question. Did they overdo it? Will this PS5 melt down in a year because Sony was pinching too many pennies like they love to do?
Oh, yeah, they do. It's going to get worse, too. There's a whole other story later about that, but... and really in all of this, the context is, do you have to make sure that you don't buy this new PS5 because it's going to turn into molten gamer slag and burn right down through your living room floor?
Well, I mean... Not exactly. Engineering is super weird and kind of like magic.
So it's strange because the math tells you this new model is worse, but it doesn't really work that way. So it's typically a universal good for electronics to be lighter, cheaper, and more electric efficient. And by that thinking, yeah, the launch PS5 is better equipped to dissipate heat. Thus, it is a better piece of electronics.
So if you want to take zero chances, you'd probably want to opt for the launch model. You're not going to have a choice, by the way.
Just lucky to find one. You can turn it down. No, thank you. I'd like the launch model, please. But to be frank, when it comes to a machine like the PS5, and specifically that the slightly increased heat doesn't seem to generate more noise, it doesn't seem in this case there's really any impact a user of that machine would ever feel or hear.
Sony clearly believes the small bump in temperature is still well within the tolerance range of the PlayStation 5, and if it results in no change in performance, what's the issue here? Or said another way, if the PlayStation 5 works just fine up to 70 degrees Celsius, the difference between 52 and 55 degrees is immaterial.
It's kind of that engineering thing. It either works or it doesn't work, and as long as everything's within tolerance, it works, and that's it. There's no better or worse. It works or it doesn't, and that's all. So I gotta admit, though, I do feel the emotional sting of it. It hurts to think that there's a PS5 that just doesn't have as much stuff. Like, they took the stuff. If I'm paying $500, I want maximum stuff.
That's true. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I guess if you're overclocking a PlayStation 5, it hurts. But if you're not, whatever. Something to be aware of, too. All this is based on a few first impressions with the 1100 series. There's a lot we really don't know right now.
First, the only real temperature data we've seen is of the console's exhaust. And the range was extremely small, and only 3 degrees higher in the newer model. But temperatures on the board itself could be very different. The 1100 series could be significantly hotter at the chip level, though it's hard to imagine where all that heat would go unless it gets vented out and would then contribute to more heat.
We also don't know what'll happen to the cheaper heatsink 5 years from now once it's coated in a nice oily layer of vape condensation, dog hair, and Mountain Dew rage spittle, which we've all got on all of our consoles. I know I do.
Maybe if the efficiency of the newer, cheaper heatsink goes down, if time goes on, it gets dusty, it gets coated and stuff, maybe the fans will start to kick on a little more, and we'll be right back to that PlayStation 4 wind tunnel every time you want to play Skyrim again, because it's always Skyrim.
At the moment, though, it really looks as though these design changes won't meaningfully impact any PlayStation 5 owners, regardless of which model you get. If you just really want to know you have more metal in the case, though, go for the launch model while you're clicking the Walmart shopping cart over and over.
Although, there is a third path. There is a third path for the Giga Chad God gamers among us, and that's to get both models. And then you just drop the better fan into the launch model, then you got the bigger heatsink, you got the bigger fan, you're living large, and that PS5's never gonna overheat ever.
Then you'll be all tricked out in time to play a bunch of, wait a minute, no launch games at all.
Another night alone with Skyrim, huh?
Speaking of no games, here's a story that just literally just broke. It seems Sony's trying to squeeze some more money out of the few games they've got coming up. What a surprise, huh, guys?
Yeah, this info just broke, so we figured we'd mention it, and also it's kind of in line with the other story. In a post on the PlayStation blog today, Sony revealed that the cheapest version of Horizon Forbidden West that includes both the PS4 and PS5 versions is $80. But if you buy any individual version cheaper than that, you're kind of locked out.
So if you bought that standard $60 version of the PlayStation 4 game, you'd have to buy it again at full price on PlayStation 5 if you wanted to transfer to that version later. And this is Sony, so the full price is $70 on the PlayStation 5, of course.
So basically, if you buy the PS4 version, unless you buy a specific, more expensive version, you don't get any path to getting the PS5 version aside from just buying the whole game again. It's crazy. Granted, you can just play the PS4 version of the game on the PS5, but then you won't get all the PS5 goodies. It'll just be the PS4 version running better.
By the way, none of this is a misinterpretation or anything either. The FAQ attached to the pre-order post specifically says, quote, "There are no plans for an update offer from standard to digital deluxe edition at this time."
Yeah, so if you don't buy that from the drop, you're stuck with what you got, or you just have to buy the whole game again.
Real sneaky. I don't know how they ever thought they're going to put this over on the internet, and creates a situation where PS4 players who haven't been able to buy a PS5 yet will be encouraged to overspend by $20 just so they won't have to pay another $70 down the road.
Yeah, it's the, well, someday. It's that like kind of FOMO thing. So you just throw on the extra $20. Ugh, so you end up paying $80 for a PS4 game. Ugh, it's crazy, crazy, crazy. On top of that, Polygon points out that this directly contradicts comments from Sony Interactive Entertainment CEO Jim Ryan, who said, quote, "We have an upgrade path for PS4 users to get the PS5 versions for free, and that, quote, no one should be disappointed."
Man, if I had to buy all my games twice at a price increase, I'm more than disappointed, actually. I'm angry.
Yeah, that's kind of messed when you, man, because you presume that ought to be a thing. Like, I can buy the PS4 version and then like $20 or something that, you know, that's fair, whatever, but not the whole thing over again. Ridiculous. So, you know, not only did they rip all the heatsinks out of PS5s, but they're also strong-arming people into buying a version of a game that they won't even be able to play yet.
Not a good week for Sony, and we've been reporting on things like this with Sony for the last few months, and I have been saying this is a trend. They are running their business this way. This isn't just a one-off thing over and over and over. This is what they're doing now because they run the market. So be aware. Be aware.
Yeah, you gotta dance to their tune. The other thing that's crazy is since they kind of have established a digital monopoly on their own store, they can do stuff like this. And the Ultimate Collector's version doesn't even come with the physical copy of the game, so there's no downstream resale or anything like that. And they get to keep all that money because it's going through their own store. oh, it's ridiculous. These guys are making so much money, and the way they use their market leverage to make even more money, to do things no other company could get away with. It's, I mean, on a business level, I guess you have to respect it, but woof, they're a big old corp, that's for sure.
Yeah, we're getting to the Google "Don't be evil" territory when they removed that from their handbook. So Sony getting a little closer to that, and I'm starting to worry.
I feel like they're gonna cave on this eventually.
Oh, okay. I hope so.
I mean, similar things happened with Miles Morales and stuff like that. There were like weird barriers of cross-platform sharing, and then enough people got mad, and eventually in that case, Insomniac kind of came out of the woodwork and was like, okay, we'll fix it. So who knows? Maybe the same thing will happen here.
And if you're worried about Sony, don't worry. They're falling asleep, crying on a pile of money. So they're really upset.
All of this notwithstanding, if I could buy a PS5 right now, I totally would.
They got you, Lawrence.